for something that is equal and fair.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Can we say stand up for SueAnns Robinson, who's representing Shanquilla Robinson's family on the behalf of Shanquilla Robinson? Welcome to the show, SueAnns.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. This is the people's movement, the people's case. So I'm happy to be here.
We are happy to have you. Listen, this is a pleasure to be able to have someone to think about the people, right? When you think about high profile cases like this, it's rare that someone in your position would think to, you know what, let me touch bases with the community. Let me check in with them and get a pulse check to see how they're doing. So kudos to you. We are so grateful to have you here tonight. We know you have a lot on your plate when it comes to this case, and not only this case, other high profile cases that you've been associated with. Which brings me to the first question, right? Because just in case we have people in the audience that may not be familiar with the breadth of your work, because you're not new to this, you're true to this, but sometimes they don't know that. So can you give a little bit of background about your journey into the legal system and how you've come to find yourself where you are today, covering some of the most high profile cases when it comes to African Americans and people of color?
Sure, absolutely. I was initially a prosecutor when I first started my career because I wanted to be the best criminal defense attorney that I could. And I looked at the criminal justice system, as they call it, which, that's tongue in cheek sometimes because, there is no justice a lot of times, as a system. And it takes both sides, prosecution and defense. And a lot of people were like, why would you be a prosecutor? Why wouldn't you be a public defender? And I thought to myself, I said, by the time I have a client as a public defender, they're already in triage. They're already in the ER. They already have the charges. And we're trying to fix that problem. But as a prosecutor, I was able to exercise my prosecutorial discretion to actually look at the person as opposed to just looking them at as a file or as charges, and use my prosecutorial discretion to decide on a lot of things, whether a lot of cases would actually be brought to trial, how the cases should be charged. So that was a great experience because once I worked more on the criminal defense side, I understood what the state would come with, what their energy would be, because I had been a prosecutor. After I was a prosecutor, I went into private practice, and I've been in private practice ever since for 16 years. And, it's my honor to do this work. In terms of civil rights, Ben Crump asked me probably about 5 years ago now, the time goes so fast, to join him with his national practice. And I was like, no way. I had 2 small young kids, and I was like, you know what, this is a lot. It wasn't, oh my gosh, it was longer than that. Because it was when Alton Sterling and Philando Castile were murdered. And it was just a very hard time for me. I had been covering it on some major networks, discussing the case. And, by that point, he had asked me before. And, I declined for those reasons that I stated previously. But that point, Philando Castile and Alton Sterling's case happening within 24 hours of each other just completely rocked my whole legal world. And I started to say, listen, my experience as a prosecutor, as a defense attorney, and even as a trial lawyer comes together perfectly to assist with these types of cases, because a lot of the cases, as we've seen, they emanate from police excessive force cases, but that police contact and that criminal case contact is always the initial piece that has to be broken down. And so when I originally started working with Ben, that would always be kind of my wheelhouse in the cases, breaking down the stops, if it was a traffic stop, or breaking down the initial interaction with police to kind of see where the issues were and the problems were there. And then, I kind of just hit the ground running with all the cases. I've always been, in media and covering those cases and other cases nationally. because I think it's important to have our voice, you know, as
Absolutely.
Black attorneys, as Black advocates for our culture, to be able to understand the cases and impart them to our community, in I don't want to say in a bite-sized way, but just in a way that's understandable for all of us. Because I think a lot of time there's a lot of noise around cases, but not actual explanation. So I've always made it a point, you know, if it's a speaking engagement or it's a media request, if it's on a case that I'm actually on, or if it's a case that I'm just speaking about, to really do my best to make sure that I'm explaining what's happening in a way that's understandable for everyone.
You said, thank you so much for that high level overview of who you are and how you came to be in the places that, you know, we see you. You said something that just resonated with me. You said representation is very important, you know, when it comes to people of color, African Americans, and just, you know, advocating for those that may not be in a position financially, you know, educational wise, to be able to speak for themselves and really know the law and know their rights. But what resonated with me as you were talking, you are a woman on this team. And when I think about the reason that you're here today, speaking on the behalf, representing Shanquella Robinson, not one woman in that villa took a stand for her based on what we've read. We don't know that to be true, right?
Right.
It's all alleged.
Mm-hmm.
It's all alleged. So just from that perspective, I will say you are needed.
Mm-hmm.
And we appreciate you standing in the gap, which leads me to the next question.
Mm-hmm.
It's $1 million question.
Sure.
From your perspective, based on your experience, what is the holdup when it comes to justice? Everybody wants to know.
Right. The holdup, in my opinion, is that the case was not being prioritized initially. I think that the administration, even though they had received, not the administration directly, but Interpol and the FBI had received the extradition packet from the Mexican authorities, from the Attorney General in Cabo, I just don't think it was prioritized. And, you know, justice delayed, this is a case where justice delayed could be justice denied, because every single day that passes, memories are fading, evidence is dissipating. The witnesses that are involved that are in the United States could be collaborating, they could be doing anything. And so that's what the urgency is in this case, in terms of time. The law enforcement agencies, they're experienced in investigating cases, so they know, and we know as the public, you know, from the first 48, it should be the first 48 optimally, but sometimes it's not, right? But 135, you know, 5 months is not optimal. And so that's the reason why Ben Crump and I, Tamika Mallory, Until Freedom, and the other activists, Mario Black and the family, had the press conferences in DC to say this needs to be prioritized, because we don't want this to turn out to be a case where justice delayed is justice denied.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So that's, you know, there's an urgency to the case.
Thank you. Thank you. So as we're thinking about the case, there are a lot of questions. Like I had this interview, they were like the audience, YouTube, they were anticipating this interview. And I had the most questions come through prior to you showing up today. And there was one really profound question that stood out. And it talked about due process. And what the viewer wanted to know was, when it comes to due process, what's the due process when it comes to this case from your perspective? And also, where are we in the process, right? Based on the spectrum.
Okay.
Okay.
So you mean the due process of the prospective suspects, or you mean for the family?
Probably for suspects.
Okay. Just overall protocol in an extradition case, which there is protocol for, there is precedence for. This isn't something unique, like, oh, United States, we've never had to extradite anyone. Oh, Mexico, we've never had to extradite anyone. The traditional extradition that we're familiar with would be if someone committed a crime in Mexico, a Mexican national, and came across the border to the United States. And then you'll see FBI return that person, a Mexican national, to Mexico for them to be prosecuted. Or you'll see a U.S. citizen commit a crime in the United States and then flee to Mexico, right? They go over the border like in movies, and they're like, let's go to Mexico. That's always what's said. And then the Mexican authorities have to return the person to the United States. That's traditional extradition that we all know, like the peanut butter and jelly version. The extradition in this case would require the U.S. government to turn over a U.S. citizen or citizens to the Mexican authorities to be prosecuted under their criminal justice system. It's not, there is precedence for it. And that's why myself and the other advocates for the family are saying, hey, we're not trying to dictate how the case is completed or resolved. We're asking that there be some sense of urgency and it be done swiftly. So we're saying, listen, if the Department of State and the Department of Justice review the packet and they say, okay, it shouldn't be femicide, because I know, and the main reason why I wanted to come here, obviously because I respect your platform, but because there is so much misinformation and it actually really hurts the family. And so I want to make sure that we're giving good information. There's a theory that because it says femicide on the indictment from the Mexican authorities, that is the holdup, and that's preventing the United States from processing it. If the case is prioritized, just like me and you can sit here and say, oh, femicide isn't a United States statute, they should change the statute so that the extradition packet can be accepted. The actual authorities and agencies involved can have that exact conversation in that exact amount of time. Changing an indictment doesn't take as long as changing a tire.
Wow.
Okay, so they can have a discussion and make the decision on what needs to be done in order for the extradition packet to comply with protocol. But the case has to be prioritized. How do you get your case prioritized, SueAnn? There has to be a high level of diplomatic intervention. The president, the Secretary of State, someone has to take the responsibility, a congressperson, people that we vote for, someone has to take the responsibility to say, you know what? I'm going to direct the Department of Justice and Department of State to go get the paperwork wherever it is. If it was faxed, if it was mailed, I'm going to get it. And I'm going to say, hey, I think there has to be a meeting if it's on Zoom, or we need to go to Mexico because XYZ thing is wrong with the packet or it needs additional information. Once the extradition process has begun, we would see on our side a federal case in the U.S. courts because the suspect that Mexico wants to be extradited does have due process. So they would have an extradition proceeding in the United States where they could object to being extradited. But we would see that because that would be a public process. And that has not been done because there isn't any U.S. extradition process pending in federal court that we've seen. It would be a public record. We would be able to see it. And so that's how we know no one's being extradited on the case.
Wow. Thank you. And before I go to the next question, I just want to give you a little moment to breathe. I'm going to read a few of the super chats that have come through. BW, thank you so much for the super sticker. We really appreciate you. Same thing with Arissa Bay. Thank you for the super sticker. We have one more, I believe. Let me make sure I'm not skipping anybody. So we have a question that came through, and it's from Flozy Birkin. She says, SueAnn,
Mhm.
How did Mexico treat you trying to get answers and justice for Shanquilla and her family? That's the first question. And then, how did you feel visiting the villa when we talk about your discovery visit?
Okay. Um, Initially, when I got on the ground in Mexico, there was a lot of pushback. The funeral director, the funeral home that prepared and transported Shanquilla's body was one of my first stops because we wanted to know what was the condition of the body when they transported it. And there was a lot of pushback there. But we didn't get discouraged and stop, but it was the first day. And so it kind of took the moment, wind out of our sails to say, oh man, we traveled all this way. We had a prearranged meeting with the funeral director, with the person who actually prepared the body. And now we're not getting any information. We kept going to our next steps. And, once we kind of found the actual Mexican Red Cross, that was actually the first big break. If you remember, there were photos online of the paramedics standing over Shanquilla's body. And the attire that they're wearing is actually the Mexican Red Cross logo, which I didn't know. We happened to be driving in Cabo, and I saw the logo on the building, and I said, I
Wow.
recognize that logo. And then we turned in, and there isn't really a precedent for what I did. So it's not like I could go to a statute book and say, oh, I need to bring this, I need to bring that, I need to wear this, I need to ask that. So it really was a fact-finding mission. I did have a power of attorney signed by her mom to let people know, hey, I'm authorized by the family, certain copies of certain documents, so that the people who were sharing information would know that it was, that I'm an actual representative of the family. So that was kind of our first breakthrough on the case, was at the Mexican Red Cross, because they said, yes, we did respond
Oh, wow.
to the villa. And as a matter of fact, the paramedic who is pictured is here. And she would like to speak to you through a translator, because she actually had been getting very her and her boyfriend, she advised, had been getting threatening messages on Facebook. And obviously there's a language barrier, but she didn't understand why, because she was like, I don't know what's going on. I attended to the person, because my job is a paramedic. So I don't know why I'm getting kind of threatening or negative messages. So I first thanked her for her service to Shanquilla Robinson and her family, but explained to her, it's not Shanquilla's Robinson's family is not sending people to send messages or sending any messages to her, that they're actually grateful for everything that they tried to do for their daughter. But the end of our interaction was that when the Mexican Red Cross arrived, Shanquilla had no vitals. So there's a form where they have to fill out, and it says Shanquilla had no vitals, which is why they did not transport her. And they did do life-saving resuscitation methods on her, which contributed to some petechia on her body, because it's the electrodes that are placed on her chest. But she didn't have vitals, but they still attempted all of the procedures that they normally do when they appear on scene.
You mentioned pushback.
Mm-hmm.
Based on what you could recall,
Mm-hmm.
can you give us just a brief example of what that looked like based on your experience when you're working with high profile cases and you have people that are willing to, I can't think of the word, that are willing to help and assist, as opposed to where you're feeling like, wow, that's a bit different.
Yeah, I
Can you?
had two. I can remember distinctly two times. One, we went to the hospital where the doctor who actually attended to Shanquilla Robinson worked. We already had it confirmed that she worked there, Dr. Carolina Gutierrez, because the police report had already been leaked to Mexican press. So we had that information, even though it wasn't given to the family. They weren't given their own copy. We had that information because it was leaked. So we went to the hospital and, same thing, had the same set of documents. We're like, hey, would it be possible for us to talk to this doctor? And initially I was advised, oh, we don't know who that is. That person doesn't work here. Then I'm saying, well, no, she does work here. It's been confirmed. This is kind of her license information. Like, she definitely works here. Then I was advised, oh, well, she did work here. She doesn't work here anymore. And then that we had to leave the property immediately. And her profile and all her information had been removed from the hospital's website. The second time we had pushback was when I was speaking to the consulate, because obviously I'm a lawyer first. I understand the protocol. The consulate general is supposed to be the liaison for families in situations like this, even though the Robinson family has had to carve their own path, obviously, with me even being in Mexico in the first place. I still wanted to do what was proper and follow the protocol. The consulate was giving me all kind of, just run around and static. And it got to the point where, one, they sent us to a consulate general office that was closed, and then advised me over the phone that if the family was seeking information and wanted information so much, that they should talk to the travel mates, which to me, at this point, I'm in Mexico, very invested emotionally, obviously, because these are my clients. And the consulate that's supposed to act as the liaison is making comments and saying things that would obviously be a slap into the face of the family if he said it to them directly. Like, you have one job. You're supposed to be a liaison for Americans that are traveling abroad. Specifically, once I got to the Attorney General's office through a translator again, because my 12th grade AP Spanish couldn't get me through everything, the Attorney General said, well, where's the consulate? Because typically they would come with you and they would, let us know that you're authorized, and then you could review whatever materials you wanted to. So they were even shocked and surprised at how obstinate, or I won't say obstinate, how unhelpful the consulate was.
Well, I had a question. Like, as I do my reviews and I report out on this case, one thing that came to mind to me, just based on my international travel, the first thing I thought is, I understand the culture of Mexico. And oftentimes, based on my perspective and based on my personal experiences, when in Rome, you must do as the Romans do. And there are certain cultures that really, really expect you to adhere to their cultural norms. And the first thing that crossed my mind is, did the legal team consider hiring maybe a Mexican attorney that is bilingual and that possess dual citizenship, both here in the US and or in Mexico?
Did we consider it?
Or do you have somebody that went with you, or were you with that?
We absolutely, we had a team. So we had, we had an investigator, we had, security, armed security, like, a lot of times with most things, the actual discussions, because I have the power of attorney for the family, the discussion would be directly to me and with through the translator. But we definitely didn't, just roll up in Mexico like, oh, hey, what's up? Like, definitely I had already placed phone calls, made appointments, spoken to people, again, through a translator, to make sure that when we got there, certain things would be lined up. We didn't know what the answers would be, of course, but that certain things were lined up, because the family was being ping pong between U.S. authorities saying, this is Mexico. You have to talk to the Mexican authorities. And the Mexican authorities are saying, oh, no. You need to go to the FBI. We've already given everything to the FBI. So that's when Salamandra, as a mom, took the initiative to say, you know what, SueAnn, I know, it might not be something traditional, but can you go and see like what's actually happening, what's going on? And my response was, it would be my honor, because I did and do and continue to want to get to the bottom, kind of what happened. And then in the question, they asked, how was it to go to the villa?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many people are, super spiritual, but I will say that even just driving to the villa, I had a very hard time, in the sense that you're driving through this place that is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, and I'm 40. So I've been some places. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, Shanquilla was in her transportation looking at these exact same places and thinking to herself, wow, I'm really going to have the opportunity to vacation, relax, celebrate my achievements, take a break from, she was an entrepreneur. So take a break from business and all that stuff and just relax in such an amazing environment, never knowing that her life was going to come to an end in such a brutal way. So just the drive to the villa, that was always going through my mind, like, wow, this is so ironically beautiful, because in such a beautiful place, such a terrible thing happened. And then the actual villa itself, same. It's like, wow, this is the place where, she walked, and I'm sure she went on the rooftop and saw the beach view and could see over the whole area of Fundadoras, and the hammock where, she had done some Instagram stories that she was, hanging out in the hammock, and just the house itself, just a beautiful home. I can just feel like, I know she was probably thinking, this is going to be the vacation of a lifetime, incredible memories that she would make. And it was to be honest, it was very hard to be in the place, but I know what my job is, obviously, but I'm still a person, and a mom too. So, and a Black woman who travels and is adventurous. So there were a lot of moments where I did have to kind of take breaks from looking through things and doing photos and taking notes, to just kind of just commune with myself on where I was, and remembering her spirit, would be present in that place.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine being in such a beautiful place for a horrible agenda. You know what I mean? It's still justice, but just considering the circumstances. And I'm just going to give you a few seconds just to take a break, because that was a lot. And we want to make sure that we're taking care of you while you're interviewing. And I'll just read out. Thank you so much, Rabogi for the 1999 super chat. We appreciate you. Thank you. I want to gear it up a little bit if you're okay with it, but I want to keep it here. I have one final question about the doctor.
Okay.
Were you able to see the doctor's notes? And if so, what did the doctor's notes entail? And did it contain the same information that was released to the general public?
Which doctor? The autopsy? Or the doctor who was attending?
Oh, well, both, I guess. Whichever one you want to cover. Probably the most controversial one, which would be the female, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Her kind of report is that when she arrived, Shanquilla was not verbally responsive, that she was making noises, but she absolutely had a pulse. And that she was being directed to give her an IV because she had overindulged. That was what she was being advised. Oh, she drank a lot last night. She just needs an IV. Obviously, it's a medical professional, so she's doing her own assessments and things like that. And she said, I think she should be transported. She needs to be transported. And then that's when one of the travel mates called Salamandra, Shanquella's mother, Mrs. Robinson, saying, hey, they want to transport her. We need money for that because we have to pay money to have her transported. It's important to say that when I went to the Mexican Red Cross, who didn't end up transporting her because they're not allowed to transport someone without vitals, I asked the question, hey, because you don't know, I've been to other countries traveling where, even for you to go to the hospital, you have to pay cash sometimes, especially if you're coming from abroad. So I said, for her to be transported to the hospital, would you have to pay cash? I know for the doctor to come to the villa, obviously there would be some charge. But I asked about her being transported. Once the doctor says, hey, this is not, just give her an IV and have her rest, I think she needs to be transported. Do you have to pay for that? And the Mexican Red Cross was like, no. Just like here, there's private hospitals and private ambulance transportation, which you can get. But the Mexican Red Cross, similar to our Red Cross, is a charity. So they don't charge for that. But based on my review of the records, there was a back and forth in terms of the doctor saying she needs to be transported and them then having a conversation with Salamandra and then coming back to the doctor and saying, well, just try the IV. And the doctor saying, no, I think she needs to be transported. And them saying, well, just try the IV. So to me, as a former prosecutor, that piques my interest because I'm like, okay, if a medical professional is telling me somebody needs to be transported to the hospital, the last thing I'm trying to do is play doctor and say, oh, no. She doesn't need to be transported. It's fine. Let's figure out about the money. I'm like, whatever needs to be done. Do we need to carry her on our back? Like what, get whatever we need here, whatever resources we need here immediately. And we can figure out the other stuff later, because obviously the doctor felt that it was at a point in time where, based on her medical experience, she needed to be transported.
Has there been any other medical expert or medical SME that's been able to confirm and or validate, to your knowledge, the doctor's accounts of it even being possible that Shanquella exhibited signs of life upon her arrival by way of what she said, making noises?
You said, is there evidence that she was alive?
Yeah. Has anybody been able to substantiate that by way of a medical professional, a medical expert, an independent, like an independent?
Oh, you mean not from her statement?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And not witnesses.
That's correct. Not witnesses, any outside medical.
Well,
Go ahead.
Would be, and I get what you're saying, because that the $1 million question actually for me was, why does the death certificate say that she passed away within 15 minutes of the injury, but then the doctor was treating her for an hour and 45 minutes? So there is a discrepancy there for sure.
Thank you. We appreciate that. When you went to Mexico, did you receive, or did you feel like you received, a more detailed and accurate account of what happened to Shanquella that night in the villa?
What I received a more detailed account of what the witnesses advised law enforcement.
Wow.
So, the doctor's statements, other people that were in the house, the concierge, the maid saying, what she saw and what she found and what she observed. So those types of things are the details, that
Got it.
came out.
Got it. Based on your knowledge and based on your research and what you and the entire legal team was able to gather from the parents, from the Mexican officials, and just people that were there, what would you say would be the dynamics of the friendship when it comes to the Cabo Six? Who was actually friends? Who
Okay.
wasn't?
I can say that Salamandra Robinson has confirmed that she was only friends, to her knowledge, with Khalil, one of the travel mates. She actually was aware of their friendship and had interacted with him previously, and he was one of the first people to come to her home when he returned. The rest of the individuals, Salamandra is not familiar with them and doesn't know them to be her friends at all.
And I'm more inclined as an everyday person to know that the parents would know their children and their social circles better than we would as the public.
Well,
Right?
of course. Well,
Yeah.
of course. And that's kind of why, I say, part of the reason why I'm here and willing
Mm-hmm.
to take the time is because I know there's a lot of misinformation that's being shared and being spread, that actually hurts the family very much, because all of the stuff, gets back to them when people
Yeah.
create these theories and, say negative things about the family because they're trying to spark joy in a while they're grieving. All of those things impact the family a lot, and obviously, I speak to them every single day. And there's good days and there's bad days, but when people, the gift and the curse is what I try to explain to them.
Yeah.
I'm like, social media and people, carrying the story and keeping Shankwola's name out there is a gift and a curse, because obviously the power concedes nothing without demand. And as I started this interview saying, this is the people's case. It came from the internet. It came from people saying, what is going on? What is going on? What's happening here? What does this mean that someone could go on vacation and be returned in a box and nothing happened? So that's the gift, but the curse is that there's also people with negative intentions, um, or maybe not negative intentions, but just digging into it, without all the right pieces or the right context, and they're spreading misinformation.
Yeah.
And that actually harms the case. That stops the administration from, that slows them down, because they're like, wait a minute, is this a real case, or is this something, some internet hoax or internet theory? Like, what's going on here? And that's why when we sent the letter to the press, which I can have the link put in the chat, when we sent the letter to the administration and to the Secretary of State, we only included very few pages from the extradition packet. We're not going to try to jeopardize the investigation that's ongoing in any way. That's not our desire, or the goal. But we wanted the administration to know, here, this case is real. It's not living on the internet. The Mexican authorities, the Attorney General in Mexico, has done a criminal investigation. Shankwila is real. Her life was taken. She's a U.S. citizen. Her life mattered. And you all do not want to set the precedent that someone can commit crimes against a U.S. citizen abroad and then come back to the United States and use the United States as a safe haven. That's the absolutely last worst precedent that any administration would want to set. And so that's why we attached the documents and really redacted them and made sure that they were enough information. And they have this information, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the FBI and Interpol has already received this information, but it's just important to close the gap on the administration's ability to say, we didn't know about the case. We thought it was an internet hoax. We haven't heard about the case. What's the ask? What could we possibly do in a case like this? The letter and the information that we presented, and obviously is in the public sphere now, was for very specifically that reason, to get the White House's attention to say, hey, listen, this is legitimate, it's real, and we really do need diplomatic intervention.
This is good stuff. And I think it's a learning curve for some of us, right? As we're all very engaged in this case. For those of you that were asking about sending letters, we posted the link here. It's up on the screen. It's been also provided in the chat. So if there's something that you would like to say or send as an advocate for Shanquella Robinson, the legal team has posted that link in the chat, and it's also being displayed on the screen. I have a super chat from PM Channel that says, we understand the laws, international policies, and we understand international policies are different in the US and Mexico and may cause delays. Once the video surfaced, why wouldn't that negate an immediate arrest for Dejanay Jackson?
Exactly.
Okay, so you're on the same page as we are.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
there's been an issue where we're saying you can either extradite the person that Mexico has identified as the aggressor in the video, or you can criminally charge and prosecute the people here. There isn't any barrier preventing them from being prosecuted and tried in the United States. And I say them, individual or individuals. There isn't anything stopping the United States from charging them. They would do their own investigation, and then based on their investigation, they would indict.
Based on what I've seen come through YouTube by way of comments, social media, and then just public outrage, some people feel like race has been a barrier in this case. Based on just what you've seen, your experience with the legal team, do you find that to be likely, or is that just probably something we're introducing because we're a little bit more passionate about this? What's your perspective on all of that?
My perspective is, I know there's a lot of people who opine on, missing white girl syndrome. And there is truth to that the mainstream press and mainstream media prefers or has an affinity for missing and victims of crime. If they're blonde and they have blue eyes, you see the case more, it comes up more, it stays relevant longer. The examples people use are Natalie Holloway's case, which I remember that case very vividly, and remember even me reposting and sharing information and saying, wow, this is a really horrible case. It's a transnational case. So sad. Every single day in the White House press briefings, I remember there was a question asked to the press secretary, what's going on with Natalie Holloway's case? What's happening with the case? What's the administration doing on that case every day? And I thought it was appropriate, because a transnational case, a criminal act committed against a U.S. citizen abroad, should absolutely bring all of us to attention, and we should focus on it and try to resolve that, because it is a U.S. citizen. We should be trying to solve those crimes. So the delay, I initially have tried to explain to the parents and say, hey, listen, there's a lot of red tape. The U.S. obviously has a lot of priorities, so let's be patient. But the urgency that I discussed earlier, number one. But number two, we just saw with the Mexican kidnapping case where they went for medical tourism or something like that, where
I covered that.
The U.S. authorities, the FBI, was immediately able to coordinate with the Mexican law enforcement. And within 24 hours, they were offering a $50,000 reward.
That's right.
And they had investigated, apprehended, a whole rescue mission within 24 hours. So that gives me pause. That should give us all pause to say, wait a minute. The red tape didn't really slow anything down. We would like the same energy for Shanquella's case. That's what we're asking for. We're saying, hey, there's an urgency in this case as well, and we would like that same urgency applied to her case. But to your actual question, there is, kind of a scenario where mainstream media doesn't keep Black and brown victims of crime on the
radar
priority list for coverage, as long as other people who are victims of crime. And I don't think that accurately represents the heart of Americans, because I've gotten so many messages and emails and DMs and, from allies and people saying this isn't right. It could be any one of us. And so, even though there might be some skewing in the media, I don't think that accurately represents how we feel and what we actually want.
And that's why I think it's important to have a legal team as robust and diverse, and that you all, I think you have a very diverse offering of thought leadership, tenure, demographic, where you can all touch, like you can really touch and represent each demographic, each generation. I think it's important. And like you said, put us out of business. And I'm going to play that soon. I really want to play that so that they can see you in action. Let me read this super chat really quick. Hold on. Give me 1 second. All right. Miss Parker says, Queen Sheba, darling, advocacy works. Thank you. Absolutely, it does. It takes a village. I want you to think about this. Should the U.S. and Mexico decide to not cooperate with each other, will the Cabo 6 go free? You can answer it now. What I would like to do is give you a 90-second break just to take a breather, and then we'll come back to part 2. So you want to answer it now, or should we just take a 90-second breather?
Yeah, break is fine.
However, okay, perfect. So you guys, we're going to take a 2-minute break just to, because this is heavy. This is a lot of work. And we will see you back here in 2 minutes. I'm just going to put on screen and music, and we will be right back.
Mm-mm. Oh, I can't hear.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I said, thank you. Thank you,
Oh, okay.
everybody, for just giving us a breather. We want to make sure we take good care of our guests and prioritize their well-being.
Mhm.
And if it's okay with you, SueAnn, we can pick up where we left off regarding the question that I posed before we went on to break.
Mhm.
Should the U.S. and Mexico
Mhm.
decide to not cooperate with each other, will the Cabo Six go free?
No, that's not something that would prevent them. Lack of cooperation is one of many things that could cause that to happen, for justice to be denied in this case. That is one of many things that could happen. um you know, the witnesses could disappear, evidence could disappear, so there's many things that could happen to cause justice to be denied in this case. So that's one thing. If Mexican authorities don't cooperate with US authorities, obviously that would cause an issue. But again, the US authorities, there is a direct criminal federal statute that they can charge someone with murder for killing a U.S. citizen abroad. So the U.S. has the ability and the authority to prosecute. The issue would be how they investigate the case, and that's why we were talking about concurrent jurisdiction. Because even if the United States says, okay, we're going to prosecute them ourselves, they have to do an investigation, and part of the investigation involves going to Mexico, and they have to request concurrent jurisdiction in order to be going to Mexico to, as law enforcement, to investigate a crime.
Got it. Thank you so much. I want to play a small clip for you. And I
Sure.
also want to play it for the audience because this is what I consider a wild card in this case.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
So I'm like, let me extend my birthday and I'm going to go to this trip. Because I got asked to go on the trip in June, but I didn't reply because I didn't know what I was doing for my birthday, since the next birthday was the next week after mine. So, where I was at? Oh, yes, I left on Saturday. The trip was from Friday to Monday, October 28th, 29th, 30th. 31st going home. Didn't even make it there. So I get off my flight around like 2:16 Mexico time. I guess we're 2 hours ahead. 2:16 p.m. I make a phone call. To everybody who there. Like, I need the address. So during this phone call, that's the first time I heard that Kula wasn't feeling good. They told me that Kula was sick and she was showing signs of alcohol poisoning. And they got that because one of their friends told them that they were seeing signs. So she was showing symptoms of alcohol poisoning. But I didn't know it was a fight. Hold on. I got my Bible. Yeah, I'm gonna put this blunt down because I'm not lying. I'm not gonna lie on that. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not saving nobody's ass. I'm not protecting my ass. I'm just coming here to keep it real because y'all in my DMs going crazy and all this posting my address and stuff. Like, y'all can go there if y'all want, but it's not gonna be pretty.
Okay.
And this leads us to the wrap up. A little bit about, there's so many questions regarding Nazir.
Mm-hmm.
Based on your discovery and based on what you can share legally and from your perspective, are there any innocent parties or any people that were not aware of what really happened in that villa by way of the travel mates?
People who are not aware.
Well,
out of the travel mates. Well, all of them were present. So I don't know. Honestly, my concern with the videos and the things that the travel mates did once, the internet started bubbling, it concerns me, as an older person, because if they had so much to say and, issues and evidence that they weren't, whatever, why wouldn't they share that information with Salamandra? No one ever said to her, hey, there was a fight in the villa, there was an issue, and you know what? We think that she passed away, or we believe it was alcohol poisoning because we were all drinking. But just to let you know how your daughter's part of the day was that there was an issue, so that there wouldn't be a surprise. Oh, here's this
Right.
video. So that's kind of more, the information that I think that if somebody wants to share something, it should probably be like, okay, well, you bothered to go speak to the mom, give her Shanquilla's effects from Mexico, but the family had to find out about the video with the rest of us, which, doesn't make any sense.
I agree. I agree. And before I get to your last clip of a call to action on the behalf of the White House and the U.S. government, I just want to call out really quickly something we do here, when people are kind enough just to send an acknowledgement, especially financially. I just want to read them off really quick. Thank you, Queen and SueAnns Robinson, for doing this interview. Do we know who the unidentified male/couple are that arrived to the villa first? I think they're referring to the report where the concierge mentioned that when he got there, the chef notified him that there were two people there. I think that's what they're referring to.
Well, it would be one of the people who checked into the villa.
Got it. Okay.
So the 6 names are on the guest registry.
Okay. And Linda Best says, could corruption by Mexico be the holdup?
Well, I can say, if I didn't make clear earlier, that the Mexican authorities have advised me directly when I was in Mexico, this is a priority for us. This is a unique case. We have completed the investigation and sent everything that we're supposed to send pursuant to the extradition protocol to the United States, to FBI and Interpol. And I want to say, because earlier I talked about the press briefings and Natalie Holloway's case, we did have the opportunity, because of April Ryan, April Ryan, veteran, decorated journalist, did ask a question to the White House. Was it last week or the week before last? She did ask Karen Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, a question about Shanquilla's case. She asked follow-up questions as well. I posted it on my YouTube channel if people haven't seen it, but we've had a question asked. So it is bubbling. So it's not a situation where the White House is hearing everyone. They are hearing the family, and we're making steps in the right direction. I was saying that it would be the same energy if it was every day, but I absolutely give all the props to April Ryan. She's always going to bat for us in the White House press briefings and asking the pressing questions on behalf of us. So I give her all the props for asking that question and the follow-up questions as well.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you for that information. Last one, you guys, because we are tied for time here. It's from All Around Natural Beauty RN. If Shanquilla had no vital signs upon arrival of the Red Cross and they do not transport for that reason, how is the doctor ordering hospital transport?
I think that the doctor, according to her statement, had been requesting that transport be called from the time she did her first assessment. So it was once, based on her statement, when the Red Cross arrived, she had no vitals, but she had, according to her statement again, been saying, hey, she needs to be transported. Somebody needs to call 911. And based on her statement, she was attending to Shanquilla and requesting that 911 be called. And then the travel mates were calling Salamandra and saying, we need money. We can't transfer unless we pay, etc. By the time the Mexican Red Cross, based on the timeline, arrived, she did not have any vitals. And I do have to wrap, and I do appreciate everyone, especially you, for offering the platform to kind of stop the misinformation that's spread in the case. Again, it does directly hurt the family every time. If you do want to help, please send letters to the Department of State asking them to intervene in the case and to prioritize Shanquilla Robinson's case, because that's what we need and that's what we want. But remember, while it is something that we're talking about and discussing, Shanquilla Robinson is a person, is a human. She is a sister. She is a daughter, an entrepreneur, educated. She was a graduate of Winston-Salem University. She braided kids' hair, and sold clothes, a creative, always kind of having a side hustle and just doing everything that we say to each other, like, yes, girl, you're doing your thing. And so, unfortunately, I got to know her more, obviously, after she passed away, but someone that we would all, look to be friends with. And we can't forget that while we're discussing and talking and dissecting and figuring out things in the case. I don't want her name to be lost, or that she was such a beautiful person either.
And we most certainly understand that. And with that being said, we want to thank you for your time today, you and your team, from your publicists to everybody else in the background. We most certainly thank you for all of the hard work that you do. Thank you for giving us an extra 6 minutes here. We just want to say, keep up the good work. We're going to be here in the bushes. We're going to hold the line for you. We're always here if you want to come back and talk. Thank you so much. Have a good evening. And for those of you in the chat, don't go anywhere. So thank you so much, SueAnns Robinson.
It's my honor. It's
Absolutely.
my honor.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I work every single day in what I call the most important work of our time. I would like this job to become obsolete. I would like to have to stop coming before the press and begging for dignity and respect on behalf of my Black clients. Put us out of business, please. President Biden, Department of Justice, State Department, International Affairs, it's on y'all.
Woo. This is a tough one, y'all. This is a really tough one. That was a lot. And I can only imagine that she has to do this day after day after day and show up day after day after day and fight on the behalf of Shanquilla and her family, especially when you're not receiving the answers that you could be receiving. And with that being said, I know a lot of you had questions. We were not able to get to all of your questions, unfortunately, but I've dropped the chat in the link. So I can take 5 of you. If you want to come up one by one, or if you want to come up, I can take 5 people. If you just want to share your thoughts, if you have any questions, come on up. So in the meantime, if you are not familiar with the Shanquilla case, let me give you a trailer, just a little bit of, background to refresh your memory.
Going to those places, going to the police station, going to the Attorney General's office, going to the Mexican Red Cross, going to the office of the doctor that attended to her, going to the actual villa and the places where she walked, where she spent her last moments, trying to find answers for this family was absolutely unreal. Nobody should have to do that for something that is equal and fair.
I make a phone call. Everybody was there. Like, I need an address. So when during this phone call, that's the first time I heard that Killer wasn't doing good. They told me that Killer was sick and suicidal. Like I was, and they got that because one of their friends told them that they were seeing signs.
for the press and begging for dignity and respect on behalf of my Black client.
And with that being said, thank you all for tuning in. Good night.